And good morning again, everyone, on a Saturday, December 27th, 2025. I'm Peter Boyles. I'll be back here on Monday morning for Jeff and Billy. The weather, 61 will be the high, and then here it comes tonight, 20, and then tomorrow comes the snow and 6 degrees on Sunday night. The first hour was jammed, open lines. We'll go back to it in the next hour, talking about this question about the decline of people going to church in America. But I've been told about this, and this is stuff that, frankly, was new to me. And in studio is Joe Mahoney, and he's a two-time Pulitzer Prize winner. He's an Emmy Award-winning, and he's a multimedia guy, teaches at Metro. And the term is a media desert. And I've only recently begun reading about it. First of all, thanks for coming in the show and doing the show this morning. Good morning.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
Explain to people this term, media desert, if you would.
Sure. It may be rude to correct you. I apologize. It's more specifically news desert.
Okay.
And what it is the absence of regular, local, trustworthy news coverage in a community. So you don't have reporters on the ground going to city council, going to county commissioners, meetings, talking to the mayor, reporting on what the sheriff's doing, maybe interviewing the new sheriff. Those sort of day-to-day, coverage of the civic life, community life. And the cause of these deserts is the closure of principally newspapers, and most often in rural areas. So, for example, in Colorado, there's research out of the Northwestern University out in Chicago that identify 8 counties in Colorado that are news deserts. More local research done by Corey Hutchins out of Colorado College, and he's done amazing work on that. He probably should be sitting here talking about it, but he probably classifies 2 as pure news deserts. And so what happens is the local paper, it's usually a weekly in these smaller communities, becomes economically unviable. There's just not enough money. They can't recruit staff to come in, especially if it's a privately owned newspaper. The owner, sometimes will retire. Sometimes these papers are purchased by chains.
Well, it's expensive too, isn't it?
To run a newspaper?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a surprising number of them are actually profitable, which then leads to a chain or a hedge fund buying them.
It's what happened to radio too.
Yeah, a lot of consolidation.
Yeah.
And then when they are consolidated, so there's a lot of moving parts. As we were just talking, media is very complex. The news media is very complex. It's changing.
I started reading this because I knew you were going to be on the show, and small town radio. It used to be wonderful. I mean, I know you're kind of a small town guy growing up.
Well, so ironically, I'm usually on the other side of these conversations.
Okay.
So, but I started my career at a local radio station up in Powell, Wyoming.
Okay.
Doing the kind of journalism I just talked about. I would go to the weekly city council meetings, and every 2 weeks I'd go to the school board, and I'd come back and put together a little 1 minute. And that was the news that the community kind of deserved. Yeah. And that's missing.
What's gone? I mean, there was a time, and first of all, everything you say is right on. There was a time that guys actually spent their careers in a small town in the radio business.
Yeah. Yeah, the one of the DJs who was at the and I moved away from Powell many years ago, but I remember his name. He was a funny guy, how DJs are. Scott Mangold.
There you go.
He was there when I was just a part-time college student working at that paper. I was at a junior college in my hometown for a couple of years, and he became mayor of Powell for a time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just heard that through the grapevine, but they really become, it's really part of the community and, embedded, and you go do your show in the morning and you see your neighbors.
Did high school sports.
Mm-hmm.
When it was big.
Yeah.
I mean, I know guys that did it, and
so I look, to reference back to because this is a very it's very much a rural phenomenon, the news deserts. I think back to my hometown paper, the Pal Tribune. It's run by the Bonner family, multiple generations, an amazing newspaper, an excellent newspaper, serving a town of about 4,000.
Yeah. No, I'm more than it's KOA. Its designation, we've talked about it many times, was king of agriculture, is what KOA's calls meant. And so we would get all the small town papers. And it was one of the things that led to a tragedy, but I would sit and read them. And they played who played basketball and what football team played whom, and where dances were and where the auctions took place for the cattle auctions. And I mean, it was like, and friends of mine that worked made their bones in small town radio stations like you're talking about. And they were great jobs. I mean, they were, they were the midday guy. And they did music, but they also read the news. They, and it's gone, isn't it?
Yeah, in my sort of areas, newspapers. I started my career at a wire service at the Associated Press, and we did the same thing. We would get I started in the late 80s, so spent about 10 years there, and we would get every newspaper in Colorado, shipped to the bureau.
Oh yeah,
and you'd read through it and look for stories, and and now I think I wish I had more of these facts and figures, but nationally in 2000
it's gone.
We had 8,000 newspapers in the country.
Yep.
The vast majority of those were weeklies or semi-dailies, published a couple of times a week, and we've probably lost about 40+ % of those in 20 years.
Dean Singleton, who was a dear friend, and he owned a bunch of those.
Yeah, publisher of the Post for many years. Yeah.
And I tell a story. I had a really great intern. This was, 10 years ago at KO. I was doing a morning show on KHOW, but we were in the KOA newsroom. And I would ask the interns to get in early. And this young kid, he went to the J School in Missouri, and he came in. He had USA Today, probably had the Journal, the Rocky or the Post, one of them, and he had 4 or 5 papers, and he dropped them down. And he said, "Hey, boss, yesterday's news just got here." And he was one of the first people I met that were talking about the electronics. What do you do with that?
Yeah, so one of the things about the news desert is that you're not devoid of news, obviously, because of phones and the internet. You can get a lot of regional news, national news, social media, and what a lot of research has shown is that those sources, social media especially, national news especially, tends to polarize people a little bit. There's a lot more, I was talking to your producer Adam about this, there's a lot more opinion out there, and I'm trying to stay in my lane and stay sort of facts-based and evidence-based, but it's difficult to have a 24-hour news operation, and these days everything is 24 hours. It's not like when CNN was the only 24-hour station. Obviously.
They say you got to feed the monster, right?
You got to feed the beast. Yeah. You got to shovel into the thresher, as they say, and it's expensive. It's time-consuming. It's difficult to tell news stories at that cadence, at that pace. So you interview people and you talk about opinions, and there's nothing wrong with that, obviously.
There is.
But it's a lot more economical, and it kind of crowds out the news gathering, and so you mix in with that social media and the way that the logarithm is sort of tuned to conflict there's only so many hours in the day that someone's going to consume information, and so now you see that space is crowded with a lot of different inputs versus the local paper.
I'm going to pull you out of your lane. Our guest is great. His name is Joe Mahoney. He's a 2-time Pulitzer winner. He's an Emmy winner. He teaches at Metro. What are you seeing taking place? If I can break away from why you're here, but we see the decline of the networks. Radio is in a decline, whether they want to admit it or not. The rise of podcasting, the rise of the 24 hours you mentioned, the beast, the monster. How do I know, and what are we watching? And turn around for me, please.
Well, I think what happened, and I was at the Rocky Mountain News here in town when it closed. I'd worked there for about 10 years when it folded, and it was just a matter of the economics around it. Apologize for my sniffles. One of the first things that affected newspapers, which had sort of a monopoly, and they were the canary in the coal mine of the news business. They definitely had a monopoly in terms of classified ads and the grocery store flyers and that giant Sunday car circulars. And the internet allowed a lot of players to come in and basically not cannibalize, but take away that revenue stream. So Craigslist basically devoured the classified ads in the newspaper. Cars.com did that sort of thing. Places like, I'm not blaming Kroger, but say, for instance, Kroger realized, we don't need the Rocky to get our sales to our customers. We can just send it to them directly. And then slowly over time, the profit margins for newspapers fell, the expenses, and the expenses sort of stayed fixed. If you wanted to have that news operation, you needed reporters, who would walk down to the city hall and talk to the mayor, or go out to a crime scene, or interview the sports, hero, you name it. And
see, I think that's the only thing that keeps the Post in gear right now is sports.
Yes, yeah.
And if you look at just their weight of their sections, the sports section, especially with the Broncos now, I think it carries them.
Yeah, it definitely is. Sports tends to be, people are very passionate about that. They're very committed to that. They, kind of form a relationship with the beat writers and the columnists and those sorts. But that's an area that can be done, by outsiders. The Athletic, which is, is owned by the Times.
But there's still something about sports, and no one cares right now. It used to be that when a candidate would seek out the endorsement of the Rocky or the Post or whomever, doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, I think that goes back to sort of the onslaught of opinion.
Yes.
Everyone's got an opinion. You see, something I noticed that kind of drives me a little crazy is on social media you have these what they're called newsfluencers, influencers.
Influencers, sure.
It's someone has taken the reporting of another organization, green screened it behind them, and now is sort of given their opinion. And I think depending on the level of media literacy, some folks will think, that's journalism.
Yes.
Like, well, that's commentary.
Yes.
It may be fact-based, but that person didn't go and gather the news and synthesize it and produce it. They're just responding to it.
We're doing, this morning, I think, before you got in here, we're looking at the decline of people attending religious services in the country today, and had a caller call up. That's not true because and I said, well, there's that great line when you're doing statistical variances and looking at stuff, and the line is, all Indians walk in single file because the ones I saw do or did. So now there's the truth, and there's a lot of craziness on the internet too. But how does that reflect on the decline of newspapers and certainly the decline of networks? Your opinion, your thoughts?
Well, I think I really do think it goes back to this phrase. You've probably heard it. I know you've heard it, the attention economy. And so pre-internet, pre-digital distribution, pre-broadband access, there was basically a monopoly of sorts in information.
Yeah.
So when you woke up in the morning, typical person might open, not everybody, but they'd open up the newspaper, kind of get a feel for what's going on. They would get in the car, listen to possibly you.
Or KOA's morning news, of course.
On the way to the drive, they'd hear about, what had happened, not necessarily yesterday, as your intern said, but what's going on sort of now, the first work all day, come home, catch KUSA or KCNC and find out what happened at 5, watch the evening news. And that was sort of the media diet. Now the media diet is an absolute smorgasbord, and there are there's definitely positives to that. You hear more voices, more different people. It's more places that maybe didn't get as much coverage. It's there's more coverage of those neighborhoods or communities or topics. The downside is that because anyone can do it, everybody can, and there is a certain amount of expertise to
I agree.
to being a proper reporter. Now I've got a vested interest in that as someone who teaches journalism, but there are ethical guidelines, there are fact-checking thresholds that you have to meet. There's a vetting process if you have news organization.
But that's out the window
editors.
on the internet.
Right. Anyone can fire up. I could become a reporter right here, and then what happens is the viewer is not sure. Like,
Thank you.
I have some credentials,
Yes.
so maybe if they knew who I was, there was a certain amount of trust. But I have to live up. I have to live up to that. And I think what happens is that.
But in fact, that you have the credential now makes you the bad guy.
There's. Yeah, I was trying to get to that because I don't want to paint the newspaper, the journalism business of 20 years ago, 15 years ago as this glorious organization. We made mistakes. There was, this phrase gatekeeping.
Yep.
Certain.
What does that mean when the media people say the gatekeeper? How does that define that?
Well, you're sort of the funnel, or you're sort of you decide what gets into the paper and what doesn't. Now, and that, that's if you're working on, even if you're with the best intentions. And I felt like the Rocky was a very good newspaper, and I worked with the editorial leaders there for 10 years, and they all were rigorous and tried to be fair, but there's still a certain amount of stories that don't rise to the level of of the paper because you had a finite product. Now the web has changed that for good or bad.
Put them out of business.
Yeah, because now if you don't find what you want at the Rocky, I can go over here to this blog, or I can go to this more niche publication, and now the advertisers realize that, and like, well, we're not going to. We'll still advertise for you, but we're not going to pay
that money
for what we're used to.
Our guest is Joe Mahoney. He's great, 2-time Pulitzer winner, talking about the media in general. I'm Peter Boyles. Go back into open lines. Coming up, 710 KNUS.
Your 710 5-day forecast, mild and sunny today, much colder tomorrow. This afternoon, highs around 60 degrees with a westerly wind shifting northeast into the evening. Clouds rapidly pick up and lows will drop to the low 20s. During the night, could see a quick couple inches of snow in the metro by Sunday morning. Scattered snow showers will give way to partly cloudy skies Sunday. Highs near 30, lows in the mid-teens. Monday, sunny, highs low 40s, sunny, low 50s Tuesday. Meteorologist Don Watzel in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Great guest in studio. 710 KNUS, we are Denver's talk station. 61 will be the high today, and then here it comes, 20 degrees tonight, snow 31 tomorrow, 6 degrees tomorrow night. We're talking about the media overall, but the media desert, and then we'll go back into open lines. The first hour jammed them up on why don't you go to church? Dan Kaplis' law firm. I have known Dan Kaplis, I don't know how many years, over 20. We met in the radio business at KOA. Danny's, and again, an attorney who shares your values, because who you choose to represent you in an injury case says so much about you and everybody involved. Dan's the son of a cop. We've talked about his life in Chicago and winning the golf scholarship and coming out here and then going to law school. And Danny's believed to be the only attorney in Colorado to win 5 straight multi-million-dollar jury verdicts in Colorado crash cases. That the big truck case. Danny's also believed to have won the largest truck crash verdict in Colorado history. Kaplis Law, the official law partner of the Denver Nuggets and the Colorado Avalanche. Danny's law firm is a serious firm for serious cases. If you have a problem, Dan accepts righteous injury cases on percentage fee basis. And he represents good people, all walks of life, without regard to ability to pay. He is my friend. If you have a question, if something's happened, Dan's help, 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551. They'll get right back to you. Kaplis Law. Danny's last name, of course, Caplis, law.com. Take a look. He helped my family. 303-770-5551. In studio, and we'll come back to him. We'll get him back on again. Joe Mahoney, 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner. He's an Emmy Award-winning multimedia journalist, teaches at Metro. We started out talking about the media, or commonly known as news deserts, and now we've rolled into talking about news in general and media in particular, and all these questions about what's legit and what's not legit, which I think is one of the reasons why the media is in such disarray. How do you know who to believe?
Yeah, that's a good question. So here in town, there's a newsroom, the Colorado Sun. A lot of former Denver Post reporters. Their managing editor Dana Caulfield and I work together at the News and the AP together, and so they're a good group of experienced reporters and editors. And in their stories, if you look at their stories down at the bottom, they will give a set of criteria that they have followed in producing that story. Fact-checked, following ethical guidelines, data validation, and things like that.
Yeah, I've read them, yeah.
Yeah, so those are sort of the, it kind of speaks to media literacy in general, that those are sort of the guidelines, maybe the guideposts for people, knowing what's an opinion versus what is reporting on an opinion. I think that's also a really difficult thing for people to parse. You may go and I'll say, Peter Boyle, what do you think about the state of such and such?
Fill in the blank.
You give your opinion.
Right.
And if you're not, I feel like if you're not a sort of a careful reader, you may think, well, that Joe Mahoney thinks such and such about this question. Like, no, I'm repeating, I'm getting your opinion on this because you are an expert in it or you've had experience with it. And I think what we've seen, I feel like what we've seen is there's a blurring between that in terms of how people receive news. It's difficult to say, okay, that was a reporter repeating something a politician or something said versus this is a commentator making claims about something they believe in.
There is the you get your expert, I'll get mine. Talk to that.
Yeah, I think that becomes, that's sort of another layer. Just as I was saying that the Sun has these guidelines and these ethical standards, and that they they will surface, so you know what their process is. It's harder to sort of figure that out with an expert. It's once
sure.
removed, like, okay, if that's an expert from the Heritage Institute, do they have a point of view? And they probably do. Is that an expert from, Berkeley, a professor from Berkeley? They may have a point of view.
But he's from Berkeley.
Right, and so you're sort of, it becomes a question of whose point of view is
Sure.
more factual. You mentioned earlier Gallup poll,
Yep.
so that's a solid poll. They have methodology. They disclose their methodology. They're fairly transparent. I think that's what you want to look for. It's like, are they transparent about their process? Are they doing things in sort of a formulaic way that's like that the community of pollsters would say that's how you conduct a legitimate poll, or this is how you conduct legitimate research. It's not new. It's always been easy for people to have a good story to tell, but why let the facts get in the way of a good story? So if you're an expert and you're telling a story about, we were mentioning earlier about Dominion voting systems.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of research has that person done? So
that was strictly predicated on a lie.
And so people will, because it gets clicks and eyeballs and so forth, and maybe it's a little inflammatory, and the logarithms are tuned to that. So suddenly that whole idea gets some momentum, and you lose track of, well, was that person truly an expert in this area, or
No.
they were just a good talker?
No, that was who they were.
Yeah, and so it makes for more work on the viewer's part. Sort of I hate to sound high and mighty, but your responsibility as a citizen is to kind of be a little more discerning about how you evaluate and gravitate towards.
When I was a boy growing up a million years ago, there were three, ABC, CBS, NBC, and public television that we both worked at was called ETV, Educational Television. It's government underwrite. And there were three papers in Pittsburgh. I don't know how many radio stations, and that was that. And now, if you take a look at what once was, ratings-wise, that's all gone. It really is all gone. And I don't know where it's gone. It's gone to the web. It's gone to podcasting. It's gone, but it's gone.
Yeah, as we were talking earlier, there's I don't want to glorify the old mainstream media. There were plenty of we made plenty of mistakes. I think back to the coverage of Columbine. And I worked for the Recommend News at the time and covered that story, and we published a photograph of Danny Rohrbaugh's body outside of the school. And that was a very, very controversial photo to publish. It was inside the paper. It was black and white, tried to be discreet, but the managing editor at the time, John Temple, who was an incredible newsman.
Knew John well.
Yeah. He's a very solid good boss, very solid newsman, journalist. Decided to do that because he wanted to show how, just the impact of this. And we got a lot of criticism for it. It was very, very much
I remember.
But years later, Sue Petrone, Danny's mom, said, you know what, I hated that you did this at the time. I thought it was, completely exploitative. She was very critical. But now I understand. So sometimes you make those mistakes, but it's for, sort of a maybe a more long-term good. But at the time, that was a mistake. And so we also made mistakes about who we would put in the newspaper and sort of that gatekeeping that we talked about earlier. And so I think the internet, the ability for more people to do tell stories about their communities or their certain topics that weren't making it into the three networks that you saw or the 5 o'clock local news. That's a good thing. There's less friction in that process, but it also allows other things that are not necessarily healthy media elements to propagate.
In studio, Joe Mahoney, two-time Pulitzer Prize winner, teaches at Metro. We're talking about the media in general, what's called news deserts, or actually, we've turned into bigger things, but he's a great guest. We just talked on Friday and had Patricia Calhoun from Westward on, and it was, believe it or not, 29 years ago, the body of JonBenet Ramsey was found. And that was a media circus. But Patty made the point that there was this picture that got out of the it got out of the little girl's hand, and there was the ligature. You could see the rope on her hand. And Patricia and I talked about that at great length. She took great heat because they had published that picture. And Patty said, no, all the other stuff, she's dressed up like a Vegas showgirl. And here's this moment where she really is a little girl. And I thought, that was so powerful. That was Patty Calhoun. I mean, she understands the business as well, if not better than anybody I know. And so in those moments, and taking heat, woo, when she did that.
Yeah, I think I think the difference between what we see a lot of now is that there are ways to publish that, and again, you know, it's sort of a new it's a new way to distribute, but it's the sensationalization. In Patty's case, you know, there's probably a very thoughtful discussion with her editors, her reporters,
She's
things
great.
like that.
She did it. Yeah.
You know, Temple had a lot of discussions with his leadership team before publishing that photo. But there's always been, you know, people who will publish things without that kind of.
Well, now that was what I was going to
oversight.
ask you. Is now you and I were talking about Columbine, and I forget this recent killings, and
Maybe the Brown University.
that was it. And
Yeah.
they were deep divers into Columbine, and you go on the internet, and you can see the videos of Klebold and Harris, all this different stuff. Whether it's good or bad that it's there, it's there. And now there are people that want to shut down, certain websites, or actually one newspaper or whatever it is. You can't say this anymore. You can't do this anymore. What do you do with that?
Yeah, the First Amendment is it's a pretty powerful law. The shutdown, but it just covers the government. So if you and I have an opinion about this website, that's the marketplace of ideas. That shouldn't be available. You talk to their sponsors, talk to their providers, that sort of thing.
Well, pressure, sure.
So there's a lot of power behind the First Amendment that protects those sort of publishing that sort of material. But
not so sure.
Yeah,
about
but
that now.
I would say there's a lot of responsibility. Back in the day, if you wanted to do something like that, you would have to find a mimeograph machine. I'm absolutely dating myself, but
no, but you're right.
An old-fashioned copy machine. You'd have to copy out your ideas. You'd have to put them in an envelope. You'd have to buy some stamps. You'd have to have a mailing list, and then take them down to the post office. There was more of that friction. You had to be pretty motivated if you wanted to spread some of these ideas that weren't easily accepted. Maybe.
No, I read Jefferson on this, and he said the First Amendment isn't there to protect what you like; it's there to protect what you don't like.
Yeah,
and that's hard for people, I think, to understand that the First Amendment isn't about what you like; it's about what you don't like.
Right, and he had a sort of famously turbulent relationship with the newspapers at the time, which were
the broadsides.
Yeah, and very partisan. We think we have partisan. It's been a tradition in this country, but he also famously said, if I had a choice between a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I would take the latter.
That's right. He
Yeah.
defended.
Yeah, because that's that's the sort of the coin of the realm is information in a democracy, and I think we're sort of what's happened now is we're kind of awash in information.
I agree.
And it's still, in terms of how long the internet and internet-based media has been, it's still sort of a learning process.
And we are only on, I got to take a pause here, but we are only on the edge of that, as you probably more than.
Oh, sure. I mean, considering Gutenberg started the printing press,
right.
300 years.
And what was Stalin's greatest fear? It wasn't guns, it was printing presses, and it was copying machines. That's what they were afraid of in Stalin's Soviet Union. Sit still, and Solzhenitsyn wrote extensively about it. 710 KNUS Denver's talk station, open line straight ahead on Why Don't You Go to Church? 61 the high, and then here it comes, 710 KNUS. Really good guest in studio this morning. Good morning, everyone. And coming up, open lines as well. It's Saturday. There you go. That's the great mob song. December the 27th, 20 and 25, 710 KNUS. Our weather center says 61 will be the high, 20 tonight, 31 on Sunday, and 6 degrees. Lines are going to, we had to shut the phone lines down, but we're going to talk about why don't you go to church anymore and why did you quit? Great guest in studio talking about the media, and I will tell you about my friend David Ellis. You've heard me talking about taking valuables to David Ellis Jewelers. You did not get what you wanted for Christmas. Head to David today. Fortunes in cash are there, securing appraisals from David for all the valuables you have tucked away in your home, and it's true. And I share the reasons to see David just in case you don't have a Rolex watch, a rare coin set, or silver tea set. See David Ellis for all the most meaningful gift-giving occasions. David's jewelers are there, the people who work there, just the right items, just the right prices, special people that mean the most. Antique watches, emerald pendants, gold necklaces, diamond rings. He's a trusted jeweler who's been buying precious metals and antiques here in Colorado for decades. Dazzling cases filled with hundreds of new and used pieces your loved ones will treasure. Visit David Ellis Jewelers, see for yourself. Look for the black awning on the corner of 3rd and Clayton and Cherry Creek. On that corner, explore davidellisjewelry.com. Call David at 303-322-8779, 303-322-8779. 6 days a week he's there. Tell David Peter Boyles sent you. Our guest in studio, and we'll have him back. He's an expert guest. His name's Joe Mahoney. He's a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner. He's an Emmy Award winner. He teaches at Metro. And we're talking about media in general and news deserts. Let me ask you this as we come up on time. We got about 14 minutes left in the show. How did the media become the enemy?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I got into the business, I always sort of looked at it as a public service. We're trying to talk about things that matter in our town. When I covered a lot of sports, and I would always think about my photos. Would a 10-year-old like this? I was like, I'm shooting for the guys who are, and gals who are big sports fans. So I never felt like I was, an enemy. I always, like I said, thought it was a public service. I think what may have happened is that, folks who don't like what is being reported kind of want to kill the messenger. Or discredit the messenger. There's a history of discrediting news media in order to sort of suppress reporting of negative facts, negative events for folks who are in power, whether it's political power, economic power, religious power, those sort of things. So and you could probably blame the news media, which is a super broad category, but maybe we're not covering stories that people want to read about. Maybe we're not covering them in the way that people want to read about.
How about this term, fake news?
Yeah, that's a really troubling phenomenon, and I think it goes back to, reporting, like they say, is sort of the first draft of history. So it may not be complete the first time you bring a news story forward, but a responsible organization will update and will get more sources and will follow the evolution of a story. Sometimes the story is right, the facts are there, they've been vetted, the sources are legitimate, and it's an embarrassing story or it's a damaging story, and
so then it becomes fake news
because you want it to go away, and that's seems to be an effective way to address that, rather than saying, oh yeah, this is true and here's why, or I can prove that this isn't true, and a lot of times again it's reporting on maybe court cases or political outcomes or economic outcomes, and
It's
and
more
so-
than that.
So
Yeah.
you are trying to discredit the messenger.
We were talking about Nixon off the air. Nixon and the media, that was a war, straight on war. And today, Donald Trump and the media are a straight on war.
Yeah, I think elected leader, a big function of the news media, whether it's in a small town in Baca County, or if it's the Denver Post or the Washington Post, is to keep elected officials accountable. It's that fourth branch of government. It's the watchdog role, and there are rules, there are expectations that the community has, the citizens have of their leaders, their elected officials, and we expect them to abide by those rules and laws. And as an everyday person, I don't have time to watch what they're doing every day. I've got a family, I've got a job, but the role of a reporter is to say, are they living up to their promises? Are they following the law? Are they implementing programs and policies correctly and financially responsibly? And when they don't, the reporter, the news organization's job is to call that out. And of course, someone in power doesn't like that. They'll respond to that. And I think in the past, and not consistently, John Adams, because we were talking about Jefferson, famously jailed reporters and editors with the Aliens and Sedition Act.
Absolutely.
Because they were writing critical things of him, and some of it was probably untrue because the press back then was super partisan. But today, I think it's a way to avoid accountability for your actions by some elected officials and other leaders, and so it's an effective tactic because if you are on the side of the person who's being accused, regardless of the political spectrum, you're going to say, yeah, I think that is false.
There's a war between talk radio and the mainstream media. I listen every day. No, I shouldn't say I listen every day, but I listen to the wrap-ups. The war between talk radio and the media, whether it's Channel 9 and Kyle Clark or what gets printed in the Denver Post, this is a local war, and it's on a national war too.
Yeah, I think conflict draws attention. I think the way the internet is designed and social media is a huge promoting and marketing tool. The logarithm enjoys enragement, engagement, that sort of thing, and so it we may have a mechanism that enhances that, whereas in the past,
boy, do we,
and in our politics have kind of gotten very tribal and very polarized,
total tribal,
and again, trying to stay in my lane. I think that it will be an evolution as we sort of go through this. And you were saying earlier, we're on the edge of what the internet, it's
just beginning.
And now you introduce AI, which is sort of hyper.
I have an AI newscast. I do. Well, but it's coming up. It's like there's nobody there.
Yeah,
it's a newscast.
Yeah, and so and that has flaws and issues as well. And so I feel like we're going through a period where there are folks who are taking advantages of these sort of mechanisms.
The hour flew. You're really well. I mean, you're smart. You're great, and you get it. We'll speak again, I'm sure. Joe is a teacher at Metropolitan State College. Makes me feel good. Joe Mahoney, 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner, an Emmy Award winner. You've been a great guest.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's
no, you're wonderful.
Fun time to talk to you, Peter.
Thank you. On the other side, why don't you go to church? And why is it happening? Why'd you quit? 710 KNUS. Hang on. It's a Saturday morning.